Shahina. Finally, we had a few technical issues, so apologies for being a couple of minutes late, but thank you for joining us today. This is part 2. We met back in the beginning of August 9th. We had our first Newcomers session, and we talked about a variety of subjects for newcomers. We covered why people should consider the food and beverage sector as a place to work. We also talked about developing an employment search plan. And then we were kind of partway through job search strategies, if I recall, and then we ran out of time. So we said we'd do another session, and hopefully today we can talk about newcomers entering the labour market, as well as skills for success. So again, thank you, Shahina, for joining. To those watching, please remember to visit careersnow.ca and access your job ready training, mentorship sessions. You will be able to watch the first part of this series, and also access job fairs. So without further ado, Shahina, please, maybe, I don't know exactly where we left off with job search strategies, but I'll sort of let you go, and as before, we'll just chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for inviting me again. I'm so excited. It's a real pleasure, and I'm so excited to speak to you. And I'm so passionate about the work that I do. So just a quick sort of context. I work on a community literacy program called Elevate. And it is a 10-week program that really provides job seekers with, job coaching, empowerment, skills upgrading, so that they can get a job in the food and beverage. I've noticed from my experience that a lot of the times employers may say that the clients are not the right fit. And sometimes the clients or the job seekers will say, hey, that employer is not the right fit. So is that a good place for us to maybe begin by what is a good fit?
Love that. Yeah. And you hear that a lot. And as feedback, it's always so confusing. Like, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm. It's such an elusive term. People use that as like a blanket cover up for a lot of things. And unless you have a really great conversation and you find out from the client, what was it that you did not sort of enjoy about going for that job shadowing or for the job trial? And also similarly with an employer, what was it about the prospective employee that you are saying was not the right fit? So I think that both groups experience this a little bit differently. For a lot of job seekers, it is a lot around confidence. It's about sort of managing confidence. It's about, the idea of oral communication. It's about giving instructions. It's about sort of speaking up, how to manage co-workers and being in a team. And so many times employers will say that, we want somebody who's using initiative. And for a lot of job seekers, well, I don't do initiative. You tell me what I have to do, and I will do it. But if I'm doing something that you haven't told me about, I will get into trouble. So a lot of job seekers are not aware of the idea of initiative, and sometimes that could be part of not being the right fit.
That's interesting. Yeah, like you say, it depends on the culture. Sometimes people are from an environment where they do what they're asked to do, and they're not expected to look outside the box or to step in other directions. Whereas, certainly some employers will almost grade people on that. How much initiative they show, how much they will ask for more projects, and can I do this? Can I do that? Can I maybe move into that role one day? What do I need to do to be able to get that promotion? I mean, that's certainly messaging that employers like to hear. But I do agree that not every job seeker, or certainly newcomer that enters the food and beverage industry, knows that.
Mm-hmm. And Nicole, I think that when you are speaking with, say, job seekers, and they sort of tell us, well, I just stand, the production line was down, or the goods hadn't arrived, or the millwrights were fixing the equipment, and I was just waiting, to be told what to do. And when the supervisor will probably say, well, maybe you could tidy up, the ingredients or the stock room or the space. And that's when they say, well, I'm not really, I don't really want to work there because I like to know exactly what I'm doing. And if I don't get what I'm doing, I'm going to leave. And I think the other part of the focus that I work upon is about helping job seekers, not be very narrow-minded in their decision making. Sometimes we make decisions and we fly off the handle and we've made that decision. And I think having a coach, having somebody you could sort of have who can just sort of, ask these questions and look at some of the issues to help you sort of say, well, that's not a really great decision. Think about the long term. Think about what the employer, the culture of the industry is before you make these knee-jerk decisions. Because, at the end, it's going to come back on you. And sometimes it's not as bad as it seems, unless you've sort of spoken about it to somebody else, they're likely to add to that perspective and sort of say, no, hold on, this is what they were expecting, but you didn't understand what the employer's expectations were. So for me, good fit and making those decisions are really important areas to sort of delve into and dive deeper into to help job seekers.
And what advice would you give job seekers if they've gone to an interview and they have been told, the recruiter has said, you're just not the right fit for our organization? How would you advise them to probe a little bit more? I mean, I'm curious what you say, because as a recruiter, I get that a lot. They're not the right fit. Okay, what does that exactly mean? So as the job seeker, what would you advise them to ask next?
That's a really great question. I think that, there's a list of transferable skills. And, think about those skills which, you take with you from job to job. You sort of develop those skills, but you take them with you. For example, communication skills. Those are that's an employer's looking for that. Then there could be other things such as, the attitude. It could be things to do around, again, initiative that I mentioned. It could also be around timekeeping. The shift is beginning at 6, and if you're coming in at 6:10, the timing is important to an employer. So I think it's about looking at some of those very things such as timekeeping, talking about attitude, talking about communication, and then perhaps even putting it back to the employer. So what makes a right fit for your company? What is it that you're looking for? And then go back and say, well, how do I map what they've told me to the client that you're suggesting for them, or the job seeker? And say, well, how did that person do in attitude? What are you looking for? Because they're vague terms. They're so abstract. And, I've had experiences where I've had people that have high energy, really great communication skills, really strong when it comes to coming out of their comfort zone. And, you need people like that because they the team going. You want somebody in your team who's going to keep motivating you. But the person had very poor time management skills. And so, what was so important to the employer? To have somebody who was coming to work and starting the shift on time, or somebody who was a strong team player? And again, it depends upon employer to employer.
That's a really good point. We're all different and everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And I think to make a good team, you need that combination. You can't have 5 people that all bring the same skill set to the table. You need that diversity. And I like what you said about how a job seeker can ask for that feedback, because I flip it around and think employers, and it forces them to really think about what they want, because you could be in your position and in my position presenting candidates, and just being told they're not quite the right fit isn't necessarily helpful. But then maybe the employer hasn't really decided what that right fit is. They know what they are looking for, or at least when you send somebody in, they know what they're not looking for each time someone's in. But can they communicate well enough what they are looking for? So, and I think that should translate into the job description as well.
Job descriptions. I mean, I spend a lot of time helping job seekers really understand, the job posting. And, there are those pieces which the employer is looking for, focus on safety, understanding about, the safety elements and the wearing of the appropriate PPE, understanding about HACCP, understanding about GMPs, understanding, the fact that you're going to be a team player. I mean, those are the things which are in a job posting. And then you map that with somebody's resume. And in the resume, you have a lot of elements of these things. But it's those soft skills which are pretty very vague. And you do need to spend a lot of time with the job seeker to really talk about communication, to talk about building confidence. One of the questions that I know that gets asked a lot in job interviews is, Nicole, if you're working in a group of people and there was a conflict, how would you manage that? That's a standard question that's asked. And a lot of the times, job seekers are not sure how to answer that. And sometimes they may well say, well, I'm not going to work there. That's not the team that, but that's not, you have to really prepare yourself when you're responding. And so I think it's really about sort of helping prepare our job seekers. And it's just not just one conversation. It's having to see them at play, giving them situations for them to practice some of those skills that they need to put forward, either in the interview or even when they're on their probation period.
So if I'm a job seeker, I'm new to Canada, and I'm a job seeker, and I can't speak to someone like you. I don't have you at my fingertips, so to speak. What would you suggest to a job seeker in terms of preparing for that interview that you mentioned? Like how should they prepare themselves for the types of questions they might be asked?
I think that connecting with an employment counselor. So, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, there's a lot of, government funded community agencies. And there will be some person there that you can have access to who could help you with interview skills. I think there's some really great TED Talks and YouTube videos, some really great websites where you pick up. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Indeed has a lot of support. That LinkedIn has a lot of support. So I think that the key is you can just walk into an interview, and the chances of you getting the job, perhaps people do get it, and without any preparation. But I think preparation is so key, so vital, and also keeping an open mind. That don't just sort of fix yourself into this box to say that's the job I want, and if I don't get that particular position, I don't want to work for that employer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens a lot of the time. We have these preconceived ideas and plans, but you have to keep an open mind and just be open in your own growth. Mm-hmm.
That's great advice. Not to be deterred. If a question, it's not coming at you to catch you out. It's just getting to know you, getting to understand. And one of the things that I know puts some people off is the online assessments that employers will use. And I always say, they're a tool in the hiring toolbox. They are used. Employers, if they've got a lot of candidates that they're considering, will use these online assessments to just shorten that I don't want to say pile of resumes, but you know what I mean, the candidate pool they're choosing from. What advice would you give around those online assessments to somebody that's maybe not done those before?
Nicole, that's such a great question. So, I come with a essential skills lens, the skills for success lens. And the skills for success, and I know that we are going to talk about that, but it is, there's a framework, and it's looking at the skills that we need as foundational skills and skills that we build upon. So sometimes the assessments come, and if you're not strong in your reading, if you're not strong in your digital use, you may feel that there's a lot of test anxiety, or those assessments are going to catch me out. And so I think, again, you have to apply, and you have to participate in those assessments. That's what an employer is putting as part of the strategy, and you have to sort of complete them and do those assessments. But I think there's nothing like you speaking from your own place of confidence, your own value system, sharing the human part of you, because employers are human. That they want somebody, they understand, the newcomer, the immigrant journey, and they are very, very empathetic. At least the ones that I've come across, they will see that humanness of you. And I think that, don't pretend to be something you're not.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very easy. People see that very quickly.
Everyone has a family. Everyone came from somewhere, a story to tell. And it's not being ashamed of that and trying to hide it. But embracing it, but certainly putting your best foot forward, which is what you do so well, I think, to support the clients, the job seekers that you work with. Because it can be nerve-wracking, and I think covering things like you're not the best fit. It is such an ambiguous sentence, and what do you do with that? So I'm glad that we covered that. And I see a question here. Before we go any further, are there resources to get started if you have no experience in this industry?
So the question is, are there resources if you have no experience?
No experience in food and beverage, but you perhaps as a newcomer, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, no, Nicole, I think that's a really great question. So, the Careers Now website, there's a lot of great resources there. The Elevate program at PTP, we have some great resources. We have, a session whereby you can just meet me, you can meet with other facilitators just to get an understanding of what's required to work in the industry. I think, connect with employment counselors, connect with community agencies. There's some fact sheets, there's some really great videos. All of these are part of your resources that you can start to collect, look at. And at the end, you want to prepare. So you want to have a really good resume. You want to have really good interview skills. And you also want to show the employer you're willing to work. The genuineness, willing to work, is going to get you a foot into the door, and then they will sort of invest in you. They will train you. They want to build, for you and with you. So I think that sometimes we want to be absolutely perfect, but you don't have to be absolutely perfect. Just be who you are, but be willing to learn and keep an open mind and prepare. Again, I can't say any more than just keep preparing, and just don't make decisions very quickly. Bounce ideas off with somebody and perhaps think about it. Have some self-reflection before you accept the job or even turn down that job.
Very good points. So I think we've covered entering the labor market. That was one of the pieces that we wanted to cover today. And you mentioned skills for success. Take it away.
Thank you, Nicole. I love talking about skills for success. So I'm a skills for success practitioner. The skills for success is a Canadian framework. And prior to 2021, it was known as Essential Skills Framework. But it's been revamped, revitalized. And the Skills for Success framework really is those skills that provide Canadians with everyday skills that we need for work, for learning, and life. And it's not that, I'm good at one, so I won't be good at another one. These are foundational skills that we are building upon. And the more I am practicing these skills, the better I be at these skills. So which skills are we talking about? We're talking about reading. We're talking about writing. In the old framework, it used to be known as document use. But now these are specific skills. Adaptability. Adaptability is pretty challenging. I just did a session just now, and the question was, which of these skills for success are tough for you? And for me personally, I have to think about things like adaptability or creativity or innovation. Those are not easy, but that doesn't mean that we can't work at them and we can improve our skills there. The next one employers look for, which is a skills for success, is problem solving. Again, problem solving for people that come from traditional societies, I didn't problem solve. My boss did it. My boss told me what to do. My boss told me how I was to do what I had to do. Now here in this new world, but also in Canada, we are expected to speak up. We are expected to volunteer solutions. And for a lot of newcomers, again, it connects to communication. How do I speak up? Nicole, I love what you said. I love that suggestion, but I don't agree with what you said. How do I tell this to you without offending you? And so, again, that's about problem solving. A lot of emphasis is now on digital use, on creativity and innovation. So those are really skills for success, and skills for success are really around the tasks we perform on the job.
It's so, even just listening to you explain it, it's so critical that people do have an understanding of this as they go into the job market when they are looking for a role. And these are words that we understand, we know, and we know employers use. But if you're new to the country and you're new to a sector like food and beverage, the food and beverage industry, it's like you mentioned, prepare. I think it's important to find out how and where they'll use these terms, and then how can you use, drawing from your own experience, provide those examples. Because as you were speaking, I was thinking, as a recruiter, I would totally ask, can you give me an example of, when you've had to problem solve? And it's wonderful being asked those questions if you've prepared the answer. There's nothing worse than driving home thinking, why didn't I say, I should have said this, I should have said that, and then you don't think of it in the moment.
Nicole, one thing that we think is that if I have high academic skills and I have, a master's, or I have a diploma in certain topics, nutrition, or perhaps I will have strong skills for success. But that's not always the case. So I think that, we do need to sort of go past that myth that, high academic skills does not mean I've got strong skills for success. I think that the idea is that, things that I do, a lot of newcomers, they've arrived to Canada. They solved a problem. They applied critical thinking. They applied and prepared documentation to get here. So it's not to say they don't have these skills. They have these strong skills. The key part is articulating. A lot of newcomers find it very challenging to sort of think about my strengths. What am I going to tell you? I'm not used to that. I'm not used to telling you everything about me, Nicole. That's just something I'm not used to. And in Canada, I really like the style that we don't really show off, but we showcase. Showcase what I can do, showcase what I did do. I had to go and look for the right school for my children. Which school did I pick? Why was this one for me? Because they had French as opposed to not having a French instruction. That's critical thinking. And so apply that when you are going for the job interview, because the chances are you have the content. It's about how do you articulate the content.
And that ties into a question we have here. What transferable skill sets are key to highlight in an interview and or resume?
So I think the key transferable skills, which I think are important to highlight, is working with others. And working with others, now we call it collaboration. It's a real great fancy term, but it's just working with others. But working with others is also now thinking about diversity. It's also talking about belonging and being, part of the group. Working with others also connects to strong communication, which is listening. And so when I talk about diversity, it does not only mean my way is the right way. Your way and my way, and together we can develop a solution which can take our work up a level. So working with others is really important. I think the fact that you have parts of problem solving and decision making, which then connects to initiative. And when I talk about communication, it also talks about feedback. I get what you're saying, Nicole, but I'm not really picking up that you want me to improve here. I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm not picking up that this is where you want me to improve. And so what happens when I haven't improved on that point, Nicole, who could be, assuming you're my supervisor, my manager, you will say, well, Shahina, I gave you 3 months and you haven't done anything. And you haven't moved. There's no change. And so I think the bit here is about feedback. How do I understand feedback? feedback, and then how do I implement what I've been told.
It's interesting as well, because even as a manager, you're not always going to work somewhere where the person giving you that feedback has the skills. I mean, unfortunately, to deliver feedback, constructive feedback. And so it could perhaps come across in a harsh manner. It can sometimes, maybe you don't agree with it. Maybe, as a new member of staff, you actually don't agree with the feedback. And so I think that's a really interesting point that you make around feedback and how to deal with it, to truly listen. And that brings me on to, I was going to say, even in the interview situation as well, but certainly on the job, listening skills. How do you, I think we're all, we can all do better at listening. I feel like some of us are great listeners. Some of us are listening but to answer. I think that's a really common thing, especially in meetings with your boss or with groups of people. Instead of actually listening to what's being said, you're busy because you want to look competent and efficient and be ready with your answer, but that doesn't mean you're always listening. So how would you advise someone to hone those skills?
That's a really great point. I think listening is something we all think we do really well. I'm listening. I got my 2 ears open. I'm listening, but there's a difference between listening and hearing. And I think we need to make sure that we understand the difference between the two. When I'm listening, or if somebody's giving me, say, feedback, it's the intent. I have to sort of say, well, in my mind that the feedback you're giving me is coming from a good intention. And I think that is where you need to really embrace that my ego may be hurt for sure, but you're telling it to me because you want me to improve my performance on the job. And I think that is a piece that we forget. Number 2 is we don't always need to provide a solution immediately. And that's another part about listening, is really understand, so use open questions, ask for clarification, understand what the speaker is really telling you, use questioning to understand that, and then keep some space to say, can I come back to you? Or can I pick up on this again, maybe in the afternoon? So you don't always have to respond. And when you do ready to respond, you need to frame what you want to say. And, again, shift your ego out of the interaction, because sometimes we want to sort of say, what you're telling me, what I'm understanding, is this going to enhance my performance? Is it going to enhance my supervisor's performance? That's also key. I want to make my supervisor shine. I want to make my manager shine, and it's important for my manager to know that they can count on me. And so I do really need to understand. I need to frame it. I need to apply reflective listening. Don't just come in with your conversation and your points, because what are you really doing? You're clouding what the speaker is really saying.
That's such great advice. And it gets me thinking. I mean, I know that this session is based on supporting newcomers to find an opportunity in the food and beverage industry. And I do want to touch on what employers can do. I know we did in the last session a little bit, but I think it's really important to talk about it again, what employers can actually do to attract newcomers. But before we go there, I wanted to just ask about once you're in the job, the advice, like I'm sure that you're so personable, and you make these connections, you support people as they start their job in a certain company. I'm sure they come back to you if they need help. So when you're new in the role, a few things. What can you do to stand out? Like, you may have been in a certain position in the country that you are from, and then every newcomer, I think, has experienced having to take that 1, 2, 3 steps back, depending on what they were doing, and take something more like a survival job, something that they're overqualified for. What advice do you give to people that say, I don't want that job, I'm better than that, I had a team of 15, where I was before. What advice would you give there? And then I've got lots of questions, but I'll let you start there, and then we'll keep talking.
Okay, so I hope I don't lose your question. I think when you talked about standing out, I think, yeah. So I have come across many job seekers who've gone from the Elevate program, and after perhaps maybe the second job, because it's not going to be straight from classroom into the position I want. Even the job that I'm doing right now, as an instructor, as a program manager, that was not the first job that I went for. I've had so many different job, maybe not job titles, but so many different job tasks and job duties. So I think the key piece here is that the world of work is changing. You may have started out with this title. It's not the title and the job that you will do maybe in 6 months, because technology is changing. The world of work is changing. So you want to have an open mind that there will be lots of changes taking place. So embrace change. We need to be able to manage change. And, the job that I did back home is going to be totally different to the job that I'm doing here. The culture is totally different. And I don't mean just the Canadian versus my own back home culture. I'm talking about even in an employer's case. Every employer has a different culture. So you have to be aware of that. The piece about standing out is, be willing to work and work hard. Honestly, that to me is it. We millennials, or they don't always want to sort of work all the hours, and you don't have to work all the hours. But when you're on the job, you want to be seen as somebody who's working hard, but also engaged. We want to be an engaged employee, and I think a supervisor will very quickly know who's engaged and who's disengaged. And I think that is the part about standing out. Many times we think, I know everything, and my supervisor, who's younger than me, but what does she really know? What does he really know? Or the other way, my supervisor is pretty mature. What would that person know? And I think, again, you're doing yourself a disservice. I think don't underestimate the value of your co-workers.
It's so true. We did a session beginning of the week with a big bakery company, and the director of operational excellence was on the session, and he was saying that he values the people on the line so much. Like, he walks the line continuously, and if anyone knows anything about the actual machinery, the process, day in, day out, and if he's looking to make improvements, those are the people he talks to. So I think it's interesting to turn it around and say, for somebody that is starting out, perhaps they were the director of operational excellence back, where they come from, and now they're an operator, they're a production supervisor, somebody maybe not as quite as senior, but know that your comments and your attitude and how you're answering questions and the thought that you're putting in, and maybe it is a suggestion you're making to management, they're listening, they value your opinion. Don't ever think they don't. I mean, we hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you go to work and you clocked in and you're on the shift and you're amongst, people who are part of your production line, that's your family for that production line. And you may be on the same production line, for a long while. But from there on the production line, your attitude, your strengths, if you are showcasing them, people will pick those up very, very quickly. And it's very, they will say, well, Shahina, we've seen the way that you're working. We've seen that your product is of really great quality. You're putting a lot of care into your work. We have a need for a supervisor, a line supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And they will offer you that position. Again, don't come across somebody who's a know-it-all. Oh, in my country, I was managing this team and I had 50 people. That's really great. But supervisors, managers, they're not really that interested.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it is just do a really great job, showcase your skills, make your manager, supervisor shine. You will get another position. And from that position, the next position will be very quickly coming your way.
And it's a small world. Sorry, I didn't mean.
Yeah, no, totally a small world. And again, sometimes people have a process. All companies, organizations, there is a process to follow, and you have to respect the process. There are certain forms that need to be filled in. HR will ask you for, different kinds of forms, or health insurance, or financial. I mean, that is part and parcel of the job. It's a process, and many times we want to skip that piece. And again, respect that process. That there are ways that people do certain things, but when you are engaged, you are part of that process. You will make sure that your co-workers follow that process.
And you mentioned about the supervisor, and when I said it's a small world, they might move on. You might report to somebody that you really like, and they move on. But guess what? If you've shown you're engaged and you show that you're a great worker, and then an opportunity comes up in their new company, you're going to be top of mind, so they can bring you along and know that you help them look good, as you said. You want to bring supervisors and managers will bring their team around them so that they are doing a good job and they can continue to do a good job, and bring people in that help them do that, and promote people that help them do that. So that's really a great point.
Yeah, and Nicole, that comes to mind of a job seeker that was on the Elevate program. And I may have mentioned this at the last session, but it was soon after the pandemic. The pandemic hit, they arrived to Canada. It was vulnerable housing, unfamiliar with the way the system worked in Toronto, no family, having a baby. She connected on the Elevate program. Within a few weeks, you could see the glint in her eye. She's motivated. She wants to go out into the job. She wants to make life better for herself and her young child. And so we connected her with an employer, and she did the job. And she was pretty far from the employer, and she'll take an Uber to get to work. And this is like really in the winter time, pretty early on. But she did it. She did such a great job. And then it was a seasonal contract. And when it was time for the offer to finish, the job seeker was given a really great thank you card, and all the people on her team signed the thank you card and wished her well. I mean, to me, that's a real great testimony of how you must be in your job. And they're saying, I wish we had positions that we could offer to you. But the job seeker also accepted this. Did not become despondent or say, well, why did that happen to me? Or I'm not going to get another job. No, she took it part of her learning. Open-minded, I'm taking from this, it's building my resume. I now have Canadian work experience. I did not have that prior to that. I have that now. She went to another employer. And again, it's an employer that, I think we've connected with. And that employer, she had a really great role with that employer. She made sure she had time with everyone in different departments. And when she came back, and she was our graduate coming back to speak to people on the program. She would say, I went to connect with everyone. I asked them, how do you do this? How do you get to be so fast on this machine? Tell me the secrets. She was asking these questions. And then after that, she's got a job right now. She's a sanitation manager. And she says, Shahina, this is the job that I want to be at. And so how do you get to be at that? You have done so many other things. But the key was what I did in my previous life back home. It's not a waste of time. I'm going to take that here, but I'm going to showcase it in a different way.
Yeah. It's inspiring. And I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of these people have so many challenges and struggles, and they're still showing up to work. And if they're showing up and smiling, and they're on time, and they're doing a good job, and they're bringing themselves, their full selves into the environment, even if they're not perfect. No one expects perfection, especially when you take into account so many other things that are going on in their world, that perhaps someone that grew up here, that lived here forever, has family and support around. They just it doesn't enter their minds how challenging it can be for somebody else, childcare and that kind of thing, if they don't have a support system around them. So that's inspiring. I like it when you share those types of stories. Let's talk a little bit about employers and what they can do to attract newcomers, because it is such a challenging time. Employers are definitely suffering right now. There's going to be a huge amount of people retiring in the next little while. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the food and beverage industry in general. What would you say to employers? How can they write job description? How can they present themselves in an interview so that, of course, you're doing your job to prepare people for their interview, but what can employers be doing to make sure people feel welcomed and included, in the process?
That's such a great question. As you were asking me that question, I'm thinking of some of the obvious things. The continental shift. The 12-hour shift, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and a mum with children or family. That's going to be challenging. So for me, that already is something that is in no way that could be worked around. But I understand, why the employer needs it. So it's not something that I'm going to say, well, everyone should do that. I think I do see some really great elements of employers making a big difference now than they were maybe 3-4 years ago. Number one, the rate of pay, is very, very generous in some cases, and it was not there before. And I think that they're also stating that rate of pay sometimes in the job posting, or when we're meeting with employers, the HR, we get to know, the rate of pay. So I think that has also improved a lot. I think the job posting itself, doesn't really give a lot of information about the culture of the organization, or maybe it does, but job seekers are not looking at all of that. There's just too much information for job seekers to be able to sort of identify. But then we say, well, you need to research, go to the website, look around what's happening. And I think that that's another resource. So that previous question about resource, there is that big resource there. Look at employers, look at their products, look at the culture, and you get a lot of information from that. I think that, for people that are, taking the TTC and having to go from the east to the west for 6 a.m. shift stuff, that is pretty challenging. And I think that, that the idea that people don't want to work, or people are lazy and working in the food and beverage, it's not that. It's they cannot meet these demands, which are sometimes hard for people. It is so right, and I think I have seen employers say, okay, so the bus doesn't start till 6, so maybe you could take the 6:10 bus, but you'll be here 10 minutes late. Employers are saying that to job seekers. They're making these accommodations.
Yeah, I mean that seems so reasonable. The effort is there. It's not their control. It's out of their control. Certain things are out of their control. So another thing that you have just reminded me of is, I think employers, and I am seeing this too, but I think employers can certainly talk about training, and even whereas I think prior in an interview, the role that they were interviewing for was all that was being talked about, and rightly so. But I think now employers should start to talk about, if you take this position, this entry level role, we have training, we have skill development, and in 3 to 5 years, 2 to 4 years, whatever the time frame might be, you do these certain things. If everything works out and you fit our culture and you fit our organization, and there's this in the future, and really showcase the career path. I think that's one thing that the food and beverage industry has a definite step above other industries, because we do tend to like to hire from within, and we do like to promote people that understands food safety, the nuances of a food and beverage environment. What would you say? What would you say to that? Do you have comments to add to that?
Yeah, I think that for many job seekers, I mean, me included, I want to know, where am I going from this job? What's my pathway? And if you can give it to me in a way that I can understand, I have a goal. I know now how my employer is helping me reach my goal. And I think that in the food and beverage, for sure, I think that having a bit of a map or some kind of a description of how one job connects to another job, and how is my progression, I think that really helps, especially newcomers, be able to find the fit that works for them. rather than having to sort it out for themselves. I've had people that have come into maybe a packaging associate position. Then they say, well, Shahina, I think I want to be quality control. I'm working towards quality control. And, it's like, but do you really understand what is quality control? Where it sounds really great. I want to be quality control. And again, I think it's having that sort of a clear map for them, I think would be really great for job seekers. Something else that you mentioned about skills for success, about the reading and writing, and you talked about employers providing training. I have seen employers reach out to me and say, Shahina, how can I provide a really great assessment of my employees, and also how can I make sure that they are aware of the authentic documentation that I'm using, so that they can develop using the incident reports, the shift summaries, the production paperwork. Sometimes, and that is all part of skills for success. It's about the reading, the writing. It's looking at how do I write and prepare an accident report, or traceability. How do I put that documentation together? And so that's something you just mentioned. Employers are now saying that I've got a lot of newcomers coming in from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Ukraine, for whom English is not the first language. What can I do to integrate and make sure that they understand how the job is happening, but support their English acquisition? And when I say English,
I was going to say, and I think, with technical advances and more of the digital experience coming into play, maybe there are ways, and employers need to be aware of that. If someone's filling out something instead of the old-fashioned clipboard paper, maybe there's a way that they could do it in their mother tongue first and translate. I don't know, but I think there's things that can be done to improve everybody's experience with new technology.
I totally agree with you. The key thing about health and safety, I need to be able to understand and read the label on the chemical. So that's in English. Now, if you give it to me in, say, German, is everybody able to manage German? So you've got to be really clear as to the purpose of changing things in different languages. But there's nothing wrong in having some signs in different languages, especially if you have a multicultural workforce, having that happening, having people who can provide some kind of interpretation, for sure, right? So I think that it's really looking at how much investment are you doing into make sure that the workers that you have are going to be your strengths. And also, just not assuming, that person didn't understand this, so the person is lazy. No, they're not lazy. They just don't understand what you're telling them, or they cannot read this really technical jargon.
Yeah, and not only your strengths, but your cheerleaders. I mean, if they're going to their friends, family, others in their community and saying, mine's a really good employer, they really help people that are new to the country. They really support us in our career path, to help us reach our goals. And then you're supporting your own talent pipeline in effect. So it's smart business as well.
Oh, absolutely. I've had people that have had positions as millwrights, and they say we have the daily huddle, and in the daily huddle, the supervisor will just sort of talk a lot about things that need to be done, and I'm a bit lost. What is he saying? Because for newcomers, it is not just production of the language. I need the vocabulary, but I need to understand what are you saying to me. I need to be able to understand the cultural idioms that you're using. And then there's a delay between the time you've told me something to the time I'm processing it to the time I'm producing something. Yeah. And that is an area where perhaps you can get a person speaking that language to translate this. Because at the end, everyone wants to work in an organization that you feel safe. And I'm not just talking about health and safety safe, but just I want to feel safe that I'm coming in and I'm going to be respected.
Respect,
respect, right? Yeah. And I think that many employers do build this for sure. But then there are times when things are happening on the production line. It could be a colleague, it could be a coworker that people haven't picked up on, that person's been really disrespectful to somebody else. But maybe supervisors just don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
So it's about having that open line of communication. That's not going to say, well, Shahina, you're talking about this person, but that means I'm going to fire you. No, you've got to be open and allow people to share in order to create that place of respect.
I think you're so passionate about this. Obviously, it shines through. And so we've got about 10 minutes left. I would love to, I know I didn't sort of warn you that I was going to do this, but I'm sure you won't mind. How did you get into this? Because I think you found your calling, from just hearing you speak so passionately, and how I know you support newcomers and lead them into the positions into the food and beverage industry. What's your background? Where did you start,
Thanks, Nicole. So I'm Indian by heritage. I was born in East Africa. I grew up in London, England, and I'm now living in Canada. So I'm pretty multi-global. There's such a word as multi-global. I'm pretty global. But my passion has been education. It's been empowering. But I also come from a food and beverage manufacturing environment. So my sister and I, we had our own donut factory back in the UK. So I understand, I appreciate a lot of the things that the employer is looking for. But on the flip side, I also understand a lot of the challenges and needs of employees, and especially newcomer employees. And I love education. So now I use education as a bridge. I'm bridging, all sides. I'm reaching out, and I'm trying to sort of use education to empower and to help people improve the quality of their lives. And for me, food and beverage is really, something I started straight from school, from university, and I'm still continuing that, but I'm using education now. So I'm really in my sweet spot. I love my job. I absolutely love my job.
You can tell, and I think it's so important to find that, and that's one thing that I would encourage people. It's what you're passionate about, what gets you excited, and not every day is going to be amazing. There's always some tasks or some part of your job that you don't love. That's just the nature of work. But if most days you feel like fulfilled and you filled your bucket, so to speak, and your purpose, then it makes all the difference. And I do think the food industry provides so many different opportunities for people, from regardless of their interest, regardless of what they might love about food. There's something in the industry they can do with that. And like you said, maybe it's education of food, maybe it's quality in food, maybe it's marketing and food. But there's something for everybody in this industry.
Nicole, I think that the key trait to have and to sort of harness and to build upon is being the best you can be. Be the best you can be. If you're going to the job and your job is labeling, be the best labeler you can be. Motivate yourself. That it's not just, I've got to go to work and label some boxes or some products. Be the best you can be. That is a space. You got to have, gratefulness and really appreciate that you're able to get an income. You're with an employer that's going to give you respect and safety, and you need to give it back. Be the best you can be. And then, there are so many people raising their families by working in this industry. And, it's not just, a job. It is a job, but you want to make sure that job is going to fulfill you as well. And I think that could be for any job, but I think the food and beverage job industry is open to so many different possibilities, so many different exposures, so many different positions, that it's up to you. How hard do you want to work? Where do you want to go?
I love that. I think that's a perfect way to end this session. You are always inspiring and so engaging. I could chat to you for hours about this stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on this second session. I'm going to try and drag you into something else at some point in time. I'm just warning you.
Absolutely. Anytime. And I'm open for job coaching, decision-making support, Elevate program, anything that you need me to help improve the lives of people working in the industry, I'm up for it. So
love it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you have any questions for us, our email addresses have been floating across the screen at different points. As I mentioned, definitely visit careersnow.ca for information on skills training, on our job fairs with multiple employers across Ontario, as well as other mentorship sessions that we've had and some that are coming up in the future. So thanks again and have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Bye all.